Most people think the second day of marriage is for champagne and room service. I thought so too. Until the hotel manager called at 9 in the morning. He did not offer congratulations. He told me they had reviewed the footage from the reception and I needed to see it immediately. Then his voice dropped. He warned me to come alone, because if I told my husband, I would likely never see that tape again. My name is Reese Wallace. I whispered the words into the silence of the room, testing the weight of them, before shaking my head and correcting myself. Reese Hale. That was it. That was the new reality. I woke up in the kind of silence that only money can buy. The Marowwick Hotel did not let the noise of the city intrude on its guests, especially not in the bridal suite. The sheets were heavy, cool Egyptian cotton that felt like liquid against my skin, and for the first few minutes, I just lay there, letting the sensory overload of the last 24 hours settle into something manageable. My body felt a heavy, sweet sort of exhaustion, the kind that comes after dancing until 2 in the morning and drinking just enough champagne to blur the edges of the world without leaving a headache. I reached out a hand across the expanse of the mattress, expecting to find the solid warmth of Graham's shoulder. Instead, my fingers brushed against cold linens. I propped myself up on one elbow, blinking against the morning light filtering through the blackout curtains. The space beside me was empty, the pillow perfectly fluffed, as if he had barely slept on it. There was no panic, though. Graham was a creature of habit, and his habits were aggressive. He was a builder, a fixer, a man who ran his architecture firm with the same precision he applied to making his coffee. A note sat on the nightstand, weighed down by his platinum watch, the one I had given him as a wedding gift. Urgent call with the investors. Didn't want to wake you. I'll be back in an hour to make you the best breakfast of your life. Love, G. I smiled, falling back against the pillows. Of course. Even on the first morning of our marriage, Graham was securing the future. It was one of the things I loved about him, his relentless drive to ensure that we were safe, that we were stable. After growing up with a father who gambled away our rent money more often than not, Graham's obsession with security felt like a warm blanket. I finally dragged myself out of bed, wrapping a plush white robe around me. It was oversized, likely Graham's, and it smelled like him. Cedarwood and expensive scotch. I walked into the bathroom, which was larger than my first apartment, and stared at the woman in the mirror. She looked different, or maybe I just wanted her to. The anxiety that had plagued me for months leading up to the ceremony seemed to have evaporated. I looked at the diamond on my left hand, turning it slightly so it caught the overhead lights. It was heavy. It felt permanent. Mrs. Reese Hale, I said aloud, giggling a little. It felt silly, childish even, like a kid playing dress-up, but the joy was genuine. I was 32 years old, but in that moment, I felt like I had just been handed a prize I was not sure I deserved. I wandered back into the bedroom and picked up my phone. The screen was flooded with notifications, Instagram tags, Facebook posts, texts from cousins I had not seen in 10 years. I scrolled through them, feeling a warm glow in my chest. Then I saw the text from Tessa. Tessa Wynn, my maid of honor, my best friend since college, the woman who had held my hair back when I was sick and held my hand when my mother died. Her message was time-stamped at 4 in the morning. You deserve happiness. Reese, more than anyone I know. Sleep well. I typed back a quick reply. I love you. Thank you for everything yesterday. You were perfect. I was just about to set the phone down and order some coffee when it rang. The vibration buzzed against my palm, startling me. It was an unknown number, no caller ID, just a string of digits. I frowned. Usually, I would let it go to voicemail, especially on my honeymoon morning. But Graham had mentioned the investors. Maybe his phone had died. Maybe he needed me to bring him something. I slid my thumb across the screen. Hello? Is this Mrs. Reese Hale? The voice was male, middle-aged, and tight. It was not a telemarketer's rehearsed enthusiasm, and it was not a wrong numbers confusion. It was low, clipped, and strangely devoid of breath, as if the speaker were huddled in a corner, afraid of being overheard. Yes, this is she, I said, my smile faltering slightly. Who is this? Mrs. Hale. My name is Arthur Calder. I am the event operations manager here at the Merriwick. I relaxed a fraction of an inch. Oh, hello. Mr. Calder, is there an issue with the checkout time? My husband said we had the suite until noon. There was a pause on the other end, a long, heavy silence that made the hair on my arms stand up. This isn't about the checkout. Mrs. Hale, he said. His voice dropped an octave, becoming even more hushed. We have had a situation regarding the security protocols from last night's event, specifically, the reception in the Emerald Ballroom. My stomach gave a small, uncomfortable lurch. Did something happen? Did someone leave something behind? We have reviewed the footage, he interrupted, and the way he said it, clinical, cold, sent a chill racing down my spine. We conduct routine reviews of all event tapes for liability purposes. I was reviewing the feeds from the second-floor corridor and the service exits about 20 minutes ago. Okay, I said, my grip on the phone tightening. And? You need to see it, he said. Now, the warmth of the morning, the softness of the robe, the lingering joy of the wedding, it all seemed to evaporate, replaced by a sudden, sharp clarity. Mr. Calder, you're scaring me, I said, my voice hardening. Is this a prank? Did someone break something? Was there a theft? If one of the guests got rowdy, we have insurance for— It is not a theft, and it is not an accident, he cut in again. It is not the kind of thing I can describe over the phone, but it involves you, directly. I looked at the closed door of the suite. The silence of the hotel no longer felt expensive. It felt suffocating. Where are you? I asked. I am in the security control room on the basement level. Do not come to the front desk. Take the service elevator at the end of your hallway. Use your key card. I have authorized it for basement access. I'll wait for my husband, I said instinctively. Graham is just downstairs on a call. We'll come down together. No, the man said. The word was sharp, like a gunshot. Excuse me? Mrs. Hale, listen to me very carefully. Mr. Calder said, and for the first time, I heard a tremor of genuine fear in his professional tone. You need to come alone. Do not bring your husband. Do not tell your husband. Not yet. Why? I whispered, my heart hammering against my ribs. Why can't I tell Graham? Because if you tell him, the manager said, his voice barely a whisper now, there is a very high probability that you will never see this footage a second time. And believe me, you need to see it. The line went dead before I could ask another question. I stood there in the middle of the luxury suite, the phone clutching in my hand like a lifeline that had just been cut. The morning sun was still shining. The diamond on my finger was still sparkling. But the world had tilted on its axis. Don't tell your husband. It was the kind of advice you gave to someone in danger. It was the kind of advice you gave to a woman who did not know she was the victim yet. I stood outside the heavy oak double doors of the suite's private study, my hand hovering inches from the polished brass handle. Inside. I could hear Graham's voice. It was a sound I had come to associate with safety, a deep, resonant baritone that could command a boardroom or soothe a crying child with equal ease. He was speaking to someone about yield rates and quarterly projections, his tone calm, steady, and utterly normal. We are looking at a 12% increase by the third quarter, he said, the words muffled slightly by the wood. I am not worried about the volatility. It is under control. Under control. I pulled my hand back as if the brass had burned me. Inside that room, my husband of less than 24 hours, was building our future. He was handling the world, so I did not have to. And here I was, standing in the hallway, clutching my car keys so tightly the metal bit into my palm, hiding a secret that felt like a physical weight in my stomach. I felt dirty. I felt like a thief in my own marriage, sneaking around the edges of a life that was supposed to be transparent. I looked down at myself, I had shed the plush white robe and thrown on a pair of jeans and a gray sweater, the most invisible clothes I owned. I had pulled my hair back into a severe knot, stripping away the glamour of the bride I had been yesterday. I needed to be practical. I needed to be fast. I turned away from the door, my bare feet silent on the thick carpet, until I reached the entryway where I had left my sneakers. I slipped them on, my hands trembling just enough to make tying the laces difficult. "Don't tell him." The hotel manager's voice echoed in my head, a cold counterpoint to Graham's warm assurances inside the study. I opened the main door of the suite and slipped out, catching the heavy latch before it could click shut, easing it into the frame with agonizing slowness. The drive from the guest parking structure to the service entrance of the Merriwick was less than a mile, but it felt like crossing a border between two warring countries. I gripped the steering wheel, my knuckles white, trying to force logic through the panic that was rising in my throat like bile. It had to be a mistake. That was the only rational explanation. "It is probably a drunk guest," I said aloud to the empty car, my voice sounding thin and unconvinced. "Some idiot crashed a cart into a wall, or someone stole a piece of art, and they think I am liable because it is my party. Or maybe it was Graham. Maybe he had gotten into a fight?" No, Graham did not fight. He negotiated, he de-escalated, he was the most controlled man I had ever met. But then, why the secrecy? "If you tell him, you will never see the footage a second time." That sentence was a hook lodged in my brain. It implied that Graham was not the victim of the footage, but the controller of it. It implied that my husband had the power to make evidence vanish. I turned the car down the steep concrete ramp marked "Authorized Personnel Only." The air instantly changed, shifting from the ocean breeze of the coast to the damp, heavy smell of exhaust, garbage, and industrial cleaner. The lighting changed too, from the warm, golden hues of the hotel lobby to the harsh, clinical buzz of fluorescent tubes that flickered overhead, casting long, jittery shadows against the gray walls. I parked in a designated bay next to a delivery truck that was unloading crates of produce. Before I could even unbuckle my seatbelt, a figure stepped out from the shadows near the elevator bank. It was Mr. Calder. I recognized his voice from the phone, but in person, he looked younger than I expected, though far more tired. He was wearing a dark suit that looked expensive but rumpled, as if he had slept in it. He did not smile. He did not offer a hand to shake. He did not say, "Congratulations on your wedding." He just checked a clipboard, tapped his earpiece, and walked straight to my car door. "Mrs. Hale," he said. It was not a question. "Leave your bag. Take your phone, but turn it off. Follow me." I scrambled out of the car, feeling a sudden, childish urge to apologize for being there. "Is everything okay? I mean, surely we can sort this out without—" "This way, please," he said, turning on his heel and walking toward a heavy steel door. He moved with the urgency of a man who was trying to outrun a disaster. I followed him, having to jog slightly to keep up. We bypassed the guest elevators and entered the labyrinth of the hotel's nervous system. The corridors here were narrow, lined with exposed pipes and conduits that hissed and clanked. We passed carts piled high with dirty linens that smelled of stale wine and sweat. We passed a kitchen prep area where steam rose in thick clouds, and chefs shouted orders in 3 different languages. Nobody looked at me, or rather, they looked through me. I was just another problem to be managed, another body moving through the arteries of the beast. Mr. Calder swiped a keycard at a nondescript gray door, and we stepped into a cooler, quieter hallway. The carpet here was thin, industrial grade. This was the administrative wing, the brain of the hotel where the illusion of luxury was stripped away to reveal the cold, hard data of operations. "We are almost there," Calder said, his voice tight. He had not looked at me once since we left the garage. "Mr. Calder," I said, breathless, grabbing his arm to make him stop. The fabric of his suit was damp with sweat. "You have to tell me what this is. You are treating me like I am part of a crime scene." He stopped, finally turning to face me. Under the harsh halogen lights, his face was pale. I am treating you like someone who deserves to know the truth before the system buries it, he said. The Merriwick values discretion above all else. Mrs. Hale, usually, that protects our guests. Today, I am breaking protocol because... He hesitated, glancing up at the camera dome in the corner of the ceiling. Because some things are too big to sweep under the rug. He swiped his card again. The door hissed open. The security control room was a wall of monitors. Dozens of screens flickered with live feeds from every corner of the property. The pool, the lobby, the hallways, the parking lot. It was quiet in here, save for the hum of cooling fans and the click of keyboards. 3 security officers sat at the console. They were large men, wearing uniforms that looked more like police tactical gear than hotel security. When I walked in, they stopped typing. They swiveled in their chairs. I expected curiosity. I expected the leering looks men sometimes gave a woman in distress. I expected judgment. But what I saw in their eyes was worse. It was pity. They looked at me the way you look at a deer on the side of the highway that has been hit by a car but is not dead yet. They looked at me with a heavy, mournful knowledge. One of the men, the oldest of the 3, actually looked away, unable to hold my gaze. My blood ran cold. Whatever was on those screens, it was not a misunderstanding. "Room B," Calder said to the men. They nodded silently. Calder guided me past the main console to a small, glass-walled office at the back of the room. He ushered me inside and closed the door. Cutting off the hum of the servers, he pulled out a chair, a simple metal folding chair, and gestured for me to sit. On the desk, a single monitor sat black and waiting. Beside it was a keyboard. Calder took a deep breath, his hand hovering over the mouse. He looked at me, and his expression softened for the first time. It was a look of genuine apology. "I am sorry," he said softly. "I truly am, but you need to see this with your own eyes." He clicked the mouse. The screen flickered to life, a sudden burst of bluish-white light that cut through the dimness of the security office. I blinked, my eyes adjusting to the harsh contrast. The footage was high definition, crisp enough to see the texture of the carpet, though the colors were washed out, muted into bleak tones of gray and pale yellow by the corridor lighting. "Camera 4, Mr. Calder said, his voice devoid of any inflection. "Second floor, east wing. This is the hallway directly outside the bridal suite and the changing room." I leaned forward, the metal edge of the desk digging into my palms. I knew this hallway. I had walked down it a dozen times yesterday. It was quiet, lined with expensive sconces and art that cost more than my first car. "Look at the timestamp," Calder instructed, pointing a manicured finger at the bottom right corner of the screen. The digital numbers ticked forward relentlessly. 8:42 p.m. My breath hitched. 8:42. I closed my eyes for a second, rewinding my own memory. At 8:42 last night, I was in the main ballroom. I remembered it perfectly because the band had just started playing the set list Graham had curated. I was standing by the ice sculpture, holding a glass of sparkling water, taking photos with my cousins from Ohio. Graham had been... Where had he been? He had stepped away for a moment. He said, to take a call, to check on a vendor. I opened my eyes. On the screen, the hallway was empty. Then, the door to the bridal changing room, the room where my dress had hung, where my purse was stored, began to open. A man stepped out. My heart hammered against my ribs. A painful, frantic rhythm. It was Graham. He was wearing the custom midnight blue tuxedo we had picked out together in Milan. The fit was impeccable, hugging his shoulders in that specific, powerful way that always made me feel safe. He had the same sharp jawline, the same perfectly coiffed dark hair, combed back with just enough volume to look effortless. He stepped into the hallway and paused. He raised his left hand to adjust his cufflink, a small, subconscious tic Graham had whenever he was thinking or transitioning between tasks. He tugged the sleeve, rotated the wrist, and smoothed the fabric. "It's Graham," I whispered, confusion warring with the nausea rising in my throat. But I was downstairs. He said he was making a call on the terrace. "Keep watching," Calder said. He did not look at me. He was staring at the screen with the grim focus of a pathologist looking at a slide. The man on the screen did not walk away. He turned back toward the door he had just exited and held it open. A second figure emerged. Tessa, my best friend, my maid of honor. The woman who had sent me a text at 4 a.m. telling me I deserved happiness. On the screen. Tessa looked nothing like the supportive friend who had toasted to my eternal love 3 hours earlier. She was still wearing her silk bridesmaid dress, the color of dusty rose, but her body language was jagged, sharp. She was not smiling. Her eyes were darting left and right, scanning the empty corridor with the frantic intensity of a prey animal, or a predator ensuring the coast was clear. She was holding something. A thick cream-colored envelope. It looked heavy, stuffed to capacity. "What are they doing?" I asked, my voice trembling. Are they... I could not finish the sentence. The cliché rose up in my mind instantly. The husband and the best friend, the affair, the betrayal in the bridal suite while the wife smiled downstairs. It was a story as old as time, and for a terrifying second, I thought that was what I was seeing. I thought I was watching the destruction of my heart, but the footage did not show a lover's tryst. There was no touching. There was no intimacy. There was no guilt-ridden kiss. Instead, they moved with the cold, efficient synchronization of business partners concluding a transaction. The man who looked like Graham stepped into what he must have thought was a blind spot, a small alcove between two decorative pillars. He was wrong. The camera angle was wide enough to catch the edge of his shoulder and his hands. Tessa stepped in close to him. She did not lean in for a hug. She thrust the thick envelope into his chest. The man took it. He did not open it to check the contents. He knew what was inside. In exchange, he reached into his tuxedo pocket and pulled out a small, rectangular object. It looked like a keycard, or perhaps a flash drive. It was small, black, and distinct against his pale palm. He handed it to Tessa. She snatched it, her fingers closing over it instantly, making it disappear into the folds of her dress. "Stop," I said, my voice barely a squeak. "Freeze it." Calder hit the spacebar. The image froze. Tessa's face was blurry in motion, but the man stood there, the envelope half tucked into his inner jacket pocket. I stared at his face. It was Graham's nose. It was Graham's chin. It was the way Graham stood. Weight slightly shifted to his left leg. "That is my husband," I said, but the words felt like ash in my mouth. "That is Graham." "Is it?" Calder asked. He did not wait for an answer. He closed the window and clicked on a second file. "This is camera 7, he said. "The service stairwell, 3 minutes after the previous clip, 8:45 p.m. The view changed. This camera was older, the picture grainier, shot in black and white. It showed the concrete landing of a fire escape, illuminated by a buzzing safety light. The door at the top of the landing swung open. The man in the tuxedo walked in. Tessa was gone. He was alone now. He moved differently here, in the hallway. He had walked with Graham's commanding, measured stride, the walk of a man who owned the building, but the moment the heavy fire door clicked shut behind him, his posture collapsed. He rolled his shoulders, a loose, fluid motion that Graham never made. Graham was rigid. He carried stress in his trapezius muscles. This man was loose, limber. He reached up and yanked the silk bow tie loose with one hand, unbuttoning the top button of his shirt in a gesture that was sloppy, almost aggressive. Then, he leaned against the concrete wall and pulled a phone from his pocket. He brought it to his ear, and then he smiled. It was not Graham's smile. Graham's smile was restrained, charming, practiced. This smile was crooked, a little cruel, a smirk that twisted one side of his face. It changed his entire profile. Suddenly, the nose looked a little too sharp. The chin looked a little less noble. "Turn up the volume," Calder said softly. The audio hissed with static, the hum of the ventilation system loud in the enclosed space. Then, the man's voice cut through. "Yeah, it's done," the man said. I stopped breathing. The voice, it was a baritone, like Graham's. But the cadence was wrong. The pitch was slightly higher, rougher around the edges. It lacked the polished, Ivy League diction that Graham prided himself on. This voice had a lazy drawl to it, a casual disrespect that Graham would never tolerate. "Easy, like taking candy from a baby." The man on the screen laughed, a dry, hacking sound. "She didn't suspect a thing. The friend has the drive. I have the cash. Yeah, I'm heading to the extraction point now. Have the car ready." He pushed off the wall, stuffing the phone back into his pocket, and jogged down the stairs, taking them two at a time, skipping steps with an athletic, reckless agility that my husband simply did not possess. The screen went black. The silence in the small security office was deafening. I could hear the blood rushing in my ears, a roaring sound like the ocean. My mind tried to reject what I had just seen. It tried to force the pieces back into the puzzle of my life, but the edges wouldn't fit. That was Graham's face. That was Graham's suit. But that was not Graham's soul. "I don't understand," I whispered, and I realized I was shaking. A violent tremor that started in my hands and spread to my knees. He looks exactly like him. The hair, the walk, even the cufflink. How did he know to adjust the cufflink? "Mr." Calder turned his chair to face me fully. His expression was grim. "Because he was trained to," Calder said. "Mrs. Hale, that man was not your husband. That was a performance. A very expensive, very detailed performance designed to be captured on camera." I stared at the black monitor, seeing the ghost of that crooked smile. "If that wasn't Graham," I said, my voice sounding hollow, like it was coming from someone else in the room, "then who is he?" "We don't know," Calder admitted. "But we know he had access. We know he had a uniform, and we know he was working with Miss Wynne." I thought of the envelope, the thickness of it, the cash. The man had said, "I have the cash." My best friend had just paid a stranger to impersonate my husband in the middle of my wedding reception, and they had done it in front of a camera. They had stood in the blind spot, but not effectively. They had been seen. "Why?" I asked, looking up at Calder. "Why would they do this? To make it look like Graham was paying her? To make it look like a payoff," Calder finished for me. "Or a bribe, or a transaction." He leaned in closer. "Mrs. Hale, usually when people stage something like this, they are creating an alibi, or they are creating evidence to be used later. They wanted this on tape. They just didn't expect us to review the footage this morning." I felt a sudden, sharp pain in my chest, the physical manifestation of betrayal. "They swapped something," I said, my mind racing back to the first clip. "Tessa gave him the money. He gave her a card. A key card? Or a memory card," Calder suggested. "Or a digital key." "My purse," I said suddenly. The realization hit me like a physical blow. My purse was in that room. The room he walked out of. I stood up, the metal chair screeching against the floor. "My purse was in there," I repeated, the panic rising. "My ID, my passport, the USB drive with my family's trust documents." Calder's eyes narrowed. "The trust documents?" "Graham told me to bring them," I said, the memory surfacing through the fog of shock. "He said we needed to scan them for the prenuptial finalization next week. He said to keep them on a drive in my purse for safekeeping." I looked at the screen, then at Calder. "That wasn't an affair," I said, my voice hardening as the tears dried up, replaced by a cold, burning anger. "That was a heist. We are not jumping to conclusions." "Mister," Calder said, his voice steady as he pulled a sheet of paper from a folder on the desk, "the hotel is not accusing anyone of anything yet. However, we have a report from the night manager at the VIP concierge desk that I cannot ignore." He slid the paper across the metal desk toward me. It was a photocopy of a service receipt, the kind used for internal requests. "At 9:15 last night, a request was made at the desk," Calder explained, tapping the paper with his index finger. The request was for a master override code for the room safe in the bridal suite. The person who made the request claimed to be you. I stared at the paper. At the bottom, on the line marked Guest Signature, was a scrawl that looked terrifyingly familiar. Reese Hale. It had the loop on the R. It had the sharp cross on the H. It was my signature, except it wasn't. "I didn't sign this," I said, my voice barely a whisper. At 9:15, I was cutting the cake. I was in the ballroom with 300 witnesses. "We know," Calder said, "but the person at the desk had your ID. They showed your driver's license to the clerk to verify the signature match." The room seemed to tilt. My driver's license. I closed my eyes, forcing my mind back to the chaotic blur of the previous evening. The timeline was a mess of flashes and music, but I remembered the transition. After the ceremony, before the reception, Graham had suggested I touch up my makeup. I had gone to the bridal changing room, the small, private lounge next to the ballroom. I had taken off my heavy coat, the white faux fur stole I wore for the outdoor photos. My clutch was in the pocket of that coat. "My purse," I said, opening my eyes. "I left it in the changing room, in my coat pocket. I didn't want to carry it during the reception. Graham said it would be safe there because only the wedding party had key cards." Calder nodded slowly. He turned back to the computer and typed a command. The screen shifted again. "This is the camera outside that changing room again," he said. 9 o'clock. 15 minutes before the signature at the VIP desk. I watched the screen. The hallway was empty for a moment, and then the door opened. It was Tessa again. This time, she wasn't frantic. She was calm. She walked out of the room with my white coat draped over her arm. She paused, shifted the coat, and I saw it. My silver beaded clutch was tucked under her elbow, pressed tight against her ribs. She didn't look like a thief. She looked like a helpful maid of honor fetching the bride's things. She walked down the hall with a sense of purpose, heading straight for the elevators. "She took it," I said, a wave of nausea rolling through me. "She took my wallet." "And whatever was inside it," Calder added. I felt the blood drain from my face. It wasn't just $50 and a lipstick. "My license," I listed, my voice rising in panic. "My credit cards, my health insurance card, and oh God." "What else?" Calder asked. "A USB drive," I said. "A silver encrypted drive. It has my family's trust fund data on it, my father's entire estate plan, the access codes for the offshore accounts." I looked at Calder, desperate for him to understand the magnitude of this. "Graham told me to bring it. He said we needed to merge the assets formally on Monday. He said, 'Don't leave it in the hotel room safe. Keep it on you until we get home.' He made me put it in that clutch." Calder didn't look surprised. He looked resigned. He reached into his folder again and produced a second document. This one looked like a computer log, a list of digital timestamps and user codes. "This is the access log for our event booking system," Calder said. "The Merriwick uses a secure portal for high-end contracts, usually. Only the account holder can access the modification history." He pointed to a line highlighted in yellow. "At 9:20, 5 minutes after your signature was used to get the safe override code, someone logged into the event contract from a device within the hotel network. They used a 2-factor authentication code sent to a mobile number. My phone was in the clutch, too," I realized. "They used the code to download the original liability waiver and the deposit receipt," Calder said. "But they also uploaded a new document, a distinct file named Spousal Consent and Asset Waiver." I felt cold all over. Asset waiver? It's a document that usually states one spouse has no claim to the other's premarital property, or vice versa. Calder said, or, in some cases, it grants power of attorney over specific assets for the duration of the event management. My mind flashed back to a conversation with Graham just 3 days ago. We were sitting in his kitchen, drinking wine. I was stressed about the seating chart, about the flowers, about the sheer cost of everything. Graham had taken my hand, kissed my knuckles, and looked me in the eye with that intense, loving gaze I had fallen for. "Baby, stop worrying," he had said. "You focus on being beautiful. Don't worry about the paperwork. Just sign where I tell you, and let me handle the rest. I'll take care of everything." I had thought he was being protective. I had thought he was being a partner. Now, looking at the log, I realized he wasn't taking care of me. He was taking care of the paper trail. "This isn't about an affair," I said, my voice shaking but growing stronger with every word. "He doesn't want another woman. He wants my signature. He wants control." I looked at the screen where the fake Graham had stood, checking his cuffs. "That man," I said, pointing at the frozen image of the imposter. "The one who looks like Graham." "Who is he? Is he an actor? A cousin? How did he know exactly when to walk out of that room? How did he know I wouldn't be there?" "We don't know who he is yet," Calder said. "Facial recognition is running, but he has a generic look, common features. But as to how he knew?" Calder leaned back in his chair, the squeak of the metal loud in the small room. "Mrs. Hale, think about the timing," he said. "The imposter walked out of that room at 8:42. You were downstairs taking photos. Who arranged the photo session?" "Graham did," I said. "He insisted on a sunset shot on the terrace. He told the photographer exactly when to take me out." "And who told you to leave your purse in the changing room?" "Graham did." "And who has the only other key to your house, where I assume your physical documents are kept?" "Graham does," Calder nodded grimly. "The imposter knew your schedule because he was following a script. And there is only one person who could have written that script." "My husband," I whispered. "The man on the screen knew exactly where the cameras were," Calder said. "Or rather, he knew where the cameras used to be. See how he stood in the alcove? That used to be a dead zone. We only upgraded the lenses to wide angle last week. If we hadn't, we would have missed the handoff entirely." He looked me dead in the eye. "Whoever planned this, Mrs. Hale, knew the hotel's layout better than most of my staff, and they knew your movements better than you did." I looked down at my hands. The diamond ring on my finger suddenly felt like a shackle. It wasn't a symbol of love, it was a deposit, a down payment on a much larger acquisition. "They have my ID," I said, thinking through the logic. "They have my phone, they have the override code for the room safe, they have the trust fund data. And they have a man who looks enough like your husband to fool a casual observer or a security camera from a distance," Calder added. "If that man walks into a bank with your ID and a power of attorney document signed by you, he could empty everything," I finished. "And if I try to stop him, they have footage of me, or Tessa pretending to be me, authorizing it." "Exactly," Calder said. "It is a frame-up, a very sophisticated, very expensive frame-up." I stood up. The fear was still there, but it was changing. It was hardening into something sharp and cold. I wasn't just a victim anymore. I was a witness. "He's waiting for me at the house," I said. "He's making breakfast. He told me he was on a call with investors." "He probably is," Calder said. "Just not the kind of investors you think." "I need to go back," I said. "If I don't go back, he'll know something is wrong." "You can't let him know you know," Calder warned. "Not until you have secured your assets. If he realizes you've seen this footage, he will burn the rest of the evidence. He will claim you are paranoid. He will claim the footage is deep fake. He will gaslight you until you question your own sanity." "I know," I said. I remembered the pills on the counter this morning, the vitamins he had put out for me. "You've been so stressed lately. Reese, you need to take care of your mind." It was already starting. "I need a copy of this," I said to Calder. "All of it. The footage, the logs, the signature. I am burning it to a secure drive right now," Calder said. "But you need to be careful. Mrs. Hale, you are walking back into a trap, and now you know the bait is you." I drove away from the Marowak with a fire burning in the center of my chest so hot I thought it might melt the steering wheel. My hands were shaking. Not from fear anymore, but from a rage so pure and concentrated it felt like a weapon. I wanted to turn the car around. I wanted to march into the lobby, scream at the top of my lungs, and drag Tessa by her hair into the security room to force her to watch herself committing a felony. I wanted to storm into my own house and throw the laptop at Graham's head, but I did not do any of that. I gripped the leather wheel and forced my breathing to slow down. In, out, Mr. Calder's warning replayed in my mind like a loop of broken tape. If he realizes you have seen this footage, he will burn the rest of the evidence. If I walked in there screaming, Graham would not confess. He would not break down and apologize. He would look at me with those calm, concerned eyes, the eyes that had fooled me for 2 years, and he would ask if I had been drinking. He would call my father. He would call the doctor. He would say that the wedding stress had finally snapped my mind. He would turn the narrative against me before I even finished my sentence. Poor Reese. She is having an episode. She is seeing things. We need to take control of her assets for her own safety. That was the play. I could see it now. Clear as day. I pulled into the driveway of our house, the sprawling mid-century modern estate in the hills that Graham had insisted we buy because it was a good investment, and turned off the engine. I checked my face in the rearview mirror. My skin was pale. My eyes were wide and frantic. I pinched my cheeks to bring some color back. I smoothed my hair. I practiced a smile. It looked brittle, like cracked glass, but it would have to do. I unlocked the front door and was immediately hit by the smell of roasted coffee and caramelized sugar. "Reese, is that you?" Graham's voice floated from the kitchen. It was warm. It was inviting. It was the voice of a man who loved his wife. I walked down the hallway, my heels clicking on the hardwood floor. Every step felt heavy, as if I were wading through deep water. He was standing by the island, wearing a gray cashmere sweater and jeans, flipping a crepe in a pan with practiced ease. The table was set for 2. Fresh orange juice, a vase of white hydrangeas, a plate of sliced fruit arranged with geometric precision. It was perfect. It was a scene from a magazine about domestic bliss. It was terrifying. He turned and smiled at me, setting the pan down. "There you are." I woke up, and the bed was empty. I was about to send a search party. He walked over to kiss me. I had to force myself not to flinch. I had to force my feet to stay planted on the floor when every instinct in my body was screaming at me to run. His lips touched my cheek. They were warm. He smelled of expensive soap and betrayal. "Where did you go?" he asked, pulling back just enough to look into my eyes. "Everything okay?" I swallowed the bile in my throat. "The spa," I lied. The words tasted like ash. I realized I left my exfoliating cream in the locker room yesterday. You know how specific I am about my skin routine. I just wanted to grab it before they threw it out. It was a stupid lie, a shallow lie. But Graham nodded, accepting it without a blink. "Of course. You should have woke me. I would have driven you. Sit down. Breakfast is ready." He pulled out my chair. I sat. I looked at the food. The eggs were fluffy. The bacon was crisp. It was all so meticulously constructed, just like the man sitting across from me. Then I saw it. Right next to my glass of juice, there was a small amber bottle. It was new. Beside it was a folded piece of heavy cardstock. "What is this?" I asked, picking up the bottle. The label read, "Complete Calmness and Balance, High-Potency Multivitamin." "Tessa stopped by while you were out," Graham said. Pouring coffee into his mug, he didn't look at me. He was focused on the stream of dark liquid. "She dropped those off. She said you looked really pale yesterday during the reception. She's worried you are running on fumes." I picked up the card. It was a printed appointment reminder. Dr. Eris Thorne, Neurological and Physical Wellness Check, Tuesday, 10 o'clock. "She made an appointment for me?" I asked, my voice flat. "She thinks you are burned out." "Reese," Graham said, his tone dropping into that serious, concern-trolling register. "And honestly, I agree with her. You have been forgetting things lately. You left your purse in the changing room. You forgot to sign the vendor checks last week. Tessa thinks it might be a vitamin deficiency or just exhaustion. She just wants to make sure you are okay." I stared at the paper, Tuesday, that was tomorrow. The trap was not hidden. It was sitting right there on my breakfast table. Step 1. Establish that Reese is tired. Step 2. Establish that Reese is forgetful. Step 3. Bring in a medical professional, likely one on their payroll or easily manipulated, to confirm that Reese is unfit or under extreme stress. Step 4. The husband steps in. The loving, capable husband who will shoulder the burden of the finances, the estate, and the trust fund so his poor, fragile wife can rest. It was elegant. It was brutal. I feel fine, I said, putting the card down. I am just tired from the wedding. You don't look fine, babe, Graham said softly. He reached across the table and covered my hand with his. His palm was dry. You look like you are seeing ghosts. Just take the vitamins. Go to the doctor tomorrow. For me? Please? I just want to know my wife is healthy. I looked at his hand covering mine. This was the hand that had adjusted the cufflink in the hallway. No, that was the imposter. But this was the hand that had signed the check to pay the imposter. Okay, I said. I will go. I needed to test him. I needed to see the cracks in the mask. I raised a hand to my temple and rubbed it, letting out a small, sharp hiss of breath. Actually, maybe you are right. My head is pounding. It feels fuzzy, like I can't focus on anything. I watched him. I watched him closely. A normal husband would look scared. A normal husband would get up and get aspirin. Graham didn't move. He just watched me. His eyes didn't widen in alarm. Instead, they narrowed slightly. A microscopic shift. He wasn't looking at my pain. He was assessing it. He looked like a scientist watching a rat in a maze finally find the cheese. There was a flicker of satisfaction in his pupils. He was counting the beat. 1, 2, the script is working. See, he said, his voice smooth as silk. I told you, you are exhausted. Why don't you go upstairs and rest? I'll handle the cleanup. I'll handle everything. Maybe I will, I said. I stood up, leaving the perfect breakfast untouched. I think I just need to sleep. Sleep as long as you want, Graham called after me. I have some paperwork to catch up on in the study. I won't disturb you. I walked up the stairs, my legs feeling like lead. I went into our bedroom, the master suite that took up the entire west wing, and closed the door. I locked it. I went straight to my closet. My travel bag from the hotel was on the floor, where I had dropped it before leaving for the spa. I knelt beside it. I opened the main zipper. My clothes were there, folded just as I had left them, but I dug deeper. I reached into the small, hidden interior pocket where I usually kept my emergency cash and my spare car key. The zipper was half open. I knew for a fact I had closed it. I always closed it. It was a habit from living in dorms, a compulsion. I reached inside. The cash was there. The key was there. Nothing had been stolen, but the lining was pulled out. Someone had reached in, felt around, and checked the contents. Graham. He had gone through my bag while I was out. He wasn't looking for money. He was looking for the USB drive. He was checking to see if I had brought the trust documents back, or if I had left them in the purse that Tessa had stolen. He was verifying the inventory. I sat back on my heels, clutching the bag to my chest. The silence of the house pressed in on me. Downstairs, my husband was washing dishes, whistling a tune. He was probably thinking about how well the morning had gone. He was probably texting Tessa right now. Phase 1 complete. She took the bait. I looked around the room. The photos of us on the dresser. The expensive art on the walls. The life we had built. It was all a set. A stage. I wasn't living with a partner. I was living with a project manager who was executing a hostile takeover of my life. And the worst part was, he was good at it. If I hadn't seen that tape, I would have taken those vitamins. I would have gone to that doctor. I would have signed whatever paper he put in front of me because I trusted him. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the sprawling lawn. You want a sick wife? I whispered to the glass. Fine, Graham. I will play the sick wife. But I wasn't going to take his vitamins, and I certainly wasn't going to let him win. I needed help. I needed someone who understood money and fraud better than I did. I needed someone who wouldn't look at me with pity. But with a calculator, I needed Dylan. But first, I had to survive the day. I had to survive the solicitous touches, the fake concern, the watchful eyes of the man who slept beside me. I unlocked the bedroom door and lay down on the bed, pulling the duvet up to my chin. I closed my eyes and waited for the sound of his footsteps on the stairs. I waited for the performance to continue. I waited until I heard the heavy oak door of Graham's study click shut downstairs. I knew his routine perfectly. He would be in there for at least 45 minutes, likely on a conference call with his partners in London, spinning whatever narrative he needed to keep the money moving. I slipped out of the bedroom, bypassing the creaky floorboard on the third step, and made it to the garage without making a sound. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely get the Bluetooth to connect in my car. I did not call the police. I did not call my father. I dialed the one person in my life who understood that numbers often lied better than people did. Dylan Mercer picked up on the second ring. "Reese, everything okay? You are supposed to be on your honeymoon phase, not calling your workaholic cousin." "Dylan," I said, and my voice sounded like it was coming from underwater. "I need you to meet me, now, not at the house, somewhere nobody knows us." There was a pause on the other end. Dylan was a senior risk auditor for a major forensic accounting firm. He did not do small talk, and he did not do panic. He did solutions. "The Coffee Bean on 4th and Main," he said instantly. "I am 20 minutes away. Bring your laptop and your phone. Do not tell anyone where you are going." 30 minutes later, I was sitting in the back corner of the shop, hidden behind a large fern. Dylan walked in, looking like he always did. Sharp suit, tired eyes, and an expression of perpetual skepticism. He ordered a black coffee, sat down opposite me, and didn't waste a second. "Talk to me," he said, "and start with why you look like you are about to run from a murder charge." "It's not murder," I said, keeping my voice low. "It's identity theft, but the person doing it is my husband." I didn't tell him everything. I didn't tell him about the video footage of the imposter or the staged handoff in the hallway. That was too much, too cinematic. Dylan dealt in hard facts, not conspiracy theories. Instead, I told him about the missing wallet. I told him about the notification regarding the room safe. I told him about the feeling that my life was being rearranged without my permission. Dylan listened, his eyes scanning my face, looking for cracks in my logic. When I finished, he leaned back, his coffee untouched. "Did you sign anything last night?" he asked. "Anything at all? A vendor receipt? A thank you card? A prenup modification?" "No," I said firmly. "I was drinking champagne and dancing. I didn't touch a pen." "Think harder." "Reese," Dylan pressed. "Fraud isn't always about forgery. Sometimes it is about manufacturing consent. If they have your wallet and your phone, they have the keys to the castle, but they need a map. Did Graham hand you anything? Did he make you hold anything in front of people?" The memory hit me with the force of a physical blow. It was right before the ceremony. We were in the waiting area, just the two of us and the photographer. Graham had been agitated, pacing back and forth. Then, he had shoved a thick manila envelope into my hands. "Here, hold this for a second." "Babe, my hands are sweating. I don't want to stain it. It's the vendor checks for the end of the night." I had held it. I had stood there, in my wedding dress, clutching that envelope against my chest for 5 full minutes while he fixed his tie. The photographer had snapped away. "He gave me an envelope," I whispered. "He said it was checks. I held it while he got ready. Then he took it back right before we walked out." Dylan's face darkened. "He has photos of you holding the package," he said. "If that envelope contains asset transfer documents, and he has a time-stamped photo of you holding them, looking happy, that is implied consent. He can argue you reviewed them. He can argue you were aware of the contents." I felt the blood drain from my face. "But I didn't open it." "Doesn't matter in the court of public opinion, and sometimes not even in probate court if the judge is lazy," Dylan said. "Especially if he has your physical ID to back up the claim that you were the one authorizing things." He pulled a small, encrypted tablet from his briefcase. "We need to lock it down, now." For the next hour, Dylan was a machine. He guided me through the process of freezing my credit with all 3 bureaus. We changed the passwords on my primary banking apps, enabling biometric markers that only I could provide. "Okay," Dylan said, typing furiously. "Now we check the communication logs. If they are moving fast, they will be trying to redirect your mail. That is the classic move. They steal the identity, change the address, and you don't find out until the foreclosure notice shows up at the wrong house." "I checked my email this morning," I said. There was nothing. "Check the trash," Dylan ordered. "And check the spam filters. And look for the archive folders. Smart fraudsters archive the notification emails immediately so you don't see them in the inbox." I opened my email app on my phone. My hands were trembling so much I mistyped the password twice. I went to the all-mail folder and scrolled back. There it was. Subject: Confirmation of change of registered address. Sender: National City Bank. Secure service. Time: 3:14 a.m. "He did it while I was asleep," I said, showing the screen to Dylan. "He changed the billing address for my primary checking account." "Where is it going?" Dylan asked. I clicked the link. The new address was a P.O. box in a town 3 hours away, a town where Graham's shell company, the one he said he closed years ago, used to be registered. "There is an attachment," Dylan noted. "Open it." I downloaded the PDF. It was a scanned image of a request form. It looked official. It had the bank's letterhead, and at the bottom, in blue ink, was my signature. I stared at it. It was the loop of the R, the sharp cross of the H. "It looks real," I said, feeling sick. "Dylan, it looks exactly like how I sign my name." Dylan took the phone from me. He zoomed in on the image, pinching the screen until the signature was just a collection of pixels. "Look closely at the curve of the S," he said, pointing to a tiny, jagged edge in the ink line. "See that hesitation mark? And here, on the tail of the E, the ink density is uniform, perfectly uniform." "What does that mean?" "When you sign with a pen, the pressure varies. The line gets thinner and thicker as your hand moves." "This line?" Dylan shook his head. "This is flat. This is a digital lift. Someone took a high-resolution scan of your signature from another document, maybe the marriage license, maybe a check, and they pasted it onto this form. Then they printed it out, scanned it again to add noise and grain to hide the edit, and emailed it in." He looked up at me, his eyes cold and hard. "Reese, this is not just a messy marriage. This is not just a controlling husband. This is federal wire fraud. This is forgery." "He is trying to take the trust," I said. "My dad's money." "He is trying to take everything," Dylan corrected. "He is redirecting the statements so you won't see the withdrawals. He is using the imposter to do the physical transactions, and he is using the digital access to handle the paperwork. By the time you realize the money is gone, he will have a paper trail a mile long showing you authorized every cent." I took the phone back. The image of the signature burned into my retinas. It was a violation. It was my name, my identity, being used to rob me blind. "I need the original," I said. The realization settled over me like a heavy coat. The digital file isn't enough. He can claim I signed it. He can claim I e-signed it. I need to find the physical paper he scanned this from. I need to prove he cut and pasted it. "You need to be careful," Dylan warned. "If this is the level he is operating at, he has safeguards. He probably has keyloggers on your home Wi-Fi. He probably tracks your car." "He does," I said, thinking of the spa lie. "But he doesn't know that I know. He thinks I am the tired, confused wife who takes her vitamins and sleeps all day." "Reese," Dylan said, grabbing my wrist as I started to pack up. "Do not go back there and play detective. Go to a hotel. Go to your dad's." "I can't," I said. "If I leave now, he pulls the plug. He drains the accounts and disappears. I need to find where he is hiding the physical files. I need the hard drive. I need the papers." You are playing a dangerous game, Dylan said. This isn't an audit anymore. I know, I said. Standing up, I felt a strange calm wash over me. The fear was gone, replaced by a cold, calculating clarity. I wasn't just fighting for my money. I was fighting for the person I used to be before I met Graham Hale. It's a heist, and I'm the inside man. I walked out of the coffee shop, the sun blindingly bright, and got back into my car. I checked the time. I had been gone an hour, just long enough for a spa treatment. I put the car in gear and drove back toward the house, back toward the man who had stolen my name, ready to steal it back. My phone buzzed against the center console just as I pulled up to the curb a block away from my house. I was not ready to go inside yet. I was not ready to look at Graham and pretend I did not know he was methodically erasing my existence. The screen flashed. It was Mr. Calder again. I answered on the first ring, my heart jumping into my throat. Did you find something else on the tapes? Not on the tapes, Mrs. Hale, Calder said. His voice was different this time, less like a manager trying to minimize liability, and more like a detective who had just found a smoking gun. This comes from physical housekeeping. One of my staff was vacuuming the VIP lounge in the East Wing about 10 minutes ago. She found something wedged deep between the cushions of the velvet armchairs. I gripped the phone tighter. What is it? A receipt? No, Calder said. It is an access card, but it is not one of ours. It is a magnetic stripe card, the cheap kind used for temporary contractors. It has a company logo on it. Who does it belong to? I asked. A caterer? The band? That is the interesting part, Calder replied, and I could hear the rustle of plastic in the background as if he was turning the card over in his hands. The logo says Vantage Event Logistics, but we do not have a contract with anyone by that name. I checked the vendor list for your wedding 3 times. We used internal staff for everything except the florist and the band. Vantage Event Logistics, I repeated, pulling my iPad out of my bag. I propped it up against the steering wheel and typed the name into the search bar. Hold on. I am looking it up. The search results were thin. There was a basic landing page, a stock photo of a handshake, and a generic mission statement about discreet high-end solutions, no team photos, no client testimonials, no physical address, just a registered agent in Delaware. It looks fake, I said. It looks like a placeholder. I took a screenshot and sent it to Dylan. Check this company. Now. 2 minutes later, 3 dots bubbled up on my text screen. Dylan did not waste words. Shell Company. The message read, registered 4 months ago, no employees, no tax filings. The registered agent is the same one used by a dozen other ghost LLCs in the state. It is a burner corporation, Reese, used for one-time payments to avoid a paper trail. I stared at the phone. My cousin just confirmed it, I told Calder. It is a shell company. It was created 4 months ago. 4 months ago, Calder echoed, right around the time the final deposits for the wedding were made. The pieces clicked together with a sickening sound in my mind. The man in the hallway, the one wearing Graham's face, was not a lover. He was not a random thief who got lucky. He was an employee. He is an actor, I whispered, the realization making the air in the car feel freezing cold. Or a professional impersonator. Graham didn't just hire someone to steal my purse. He hired a contractor. He put him on a payroll. It explains the uniform, Calder said, and the timing. But Mrs. Hale, there is something else. When I went to log this card into the lost and found evidence locker, I cross-referenced the security grid for that hallway, the one where the handoff happened. You said it was a blind spot, I recalled. You said you upgraded the lenses. I did, Calder said. But I dug deeper into the maintenance logs to see why that specific angle was so wide. Usually, we focus cameras on the doors, not the architectural pillars. He paused. The silence on the line was heavy, pregnant with bad news. 6 weeks ago, we received a specific request to adjust camera 4 and camera 7, Calder said slowly. The request claimed that the old camera mounts were obstructing the sightlines for the floral arrangements and ruining the aesthetic of the corridor photos. The client insisted we move them 5 feet to the left and switch to a wide-angle lens to capture the full scope of the hallway arch. My breath caught in my throat. "The client?" I asked. "The groom," Calder said. I closed my eyes. I could see Graham standing in that hallway 6 weeks ago. I remembered that day. We were doing the final walkthrough. He had been so particular about the flowers. He had made a huge scene about the lighting. I thought he was being a perfectionist. I thought he wanted everything to be beautiful for me. He wasn't looking at the flowers. He was checking the angles. He was setting the stage. "He moved them," I said, my voice shaking. "He didn't just use a blind spot. He created one. He moved the cameras so they would capture the hallway but miss the alcove. He wanted the footage to show the man walking in and Tessa walking out, but not the exchange itself. Or maybe—" My mind raced. Why record it at all? Why not just turn them off? He wanted proof, I realized. He wanted proof that Graham Hale was in the hallway. He wanted a time-stamped video of a man who looks like him, walking freely, looking calm. If I ever accuse him of stealing the trust documents, he can point to that footage. He can say, "Look, I was just walking down the hall. I didn't enter the room. I didn't touch her purse." And if you accuse the imposter, Calder added, the footage is grainy enough that he can deny it is him, or claim it is a cousin, or just muddy the waters. It is manufactured ambiguity. "Are you sure?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "Are you sure it was Graham who asked for the change?" "I have the work order right here on my desk," Calder said. "It is initialed by the head of maintenance, and it is signed by the client." "Send it to me," I said. My phone pinged a second later. I opened the image. It was a standard hotel maintenance request form. Move CCTV 04 and CCTV 07 per client request for aesthetic clearance. And there, at the bottom, was the signature. It was not the shaky, digital lift signature I had seen on the bank transfer. It was not the forgery. It was the real thing. The bold, sweeping G. The sharp, confident H. It was the signature of a man who believed he was untouchable. It was the signature of a man who treated his wedding not as a celebration of love, but as the launch party for a hostile acquisition. "It is him," I said. "He directed the whole thing. He didn't just betray me, Mr. Calder. He produced a movie about it." "I am securing the original document," Calder said. "Mrs. Hale, whatever you are going to do, be careful. A man who plans camera angles 6 weeks in advance is a man who has thought of everything." "Not everything," I said, staring at the signature until the lines blurred. "He didn't think you would find that keycard, and he didn't think I would have the guts to pick up the phone." I hung up. I sat there for a long time, watching the wind blow the leaves of the oak trees lining my street. The house at the end of the block, my house, my prison, loomed large and silent. Graham was in there. He was probably checking his watch, wondering why I was taking so long at the spa. He was probably practicing his worried face in the mirror. He thought he was the director. He thought I was just a prop, a supporting character with no lines, destined to exit stage left when he was done with me. I put the car in drive. "Okay, Graham," I said to the empty air. "You want a performance? I will give you the performance of a lifetime." I wiped the tears from my face, checked my makeup in the visor mirror, and drove the last 100 yards home. The grieving bride was gone. The confused victim was gone. The actress had arrived. I decided that the most dangerous thing I could do was not to scream, but to agree. When I walked back into the house after meeting Dylan, I did not throw the accusation in Graham's face. I did not demand to know why he had hired a production company to stage our wedding reception. Instead, I walked into the kitchen, rubbed my temples with a trembling hand, and asked him what day it was. "Is it Tuesday?" I asked, looking at him with wide, confused eyes. "I feel like I lost a whole day." Graham turned from the sink, drying his hands on a dish towel. For a fraction of a second, I saw the calculation in his eyes. He was assessing the damage. He was checking to see if the seeds he had planted were taking root. "It is Monday, honey," he said, his voice dropping into that soothing, patronizing register he reserved for children and invalids. "You are just tired. The wedding took a lot out of you." "Right," I murmured, leaning against the counter and letting my shoulders slump. "Monday. I keep forgetting. My head feels like it is full of cotton." "That is normal," he said, walking over to massage my neck. His hands were strong, warm, and terrifyingly familiar. "You have been under so much stress. Just let go. Reese, I have got everything under control." "Okay," I whispered. "Thank you, Graham." The game had begun. For the next 3 days, I became the wife they wanted me to be. I was the fragile, overwhelmed bride who could barely remember to put on her shoes, let alone manage a multi-million-dollar estate. I played the part of the damsel in distress so perfectly that I almost won an award in my own mind. I started leaving things in odd places. I put the milk in the cupboard. I left my keys in the refrigerator. I would ask Graham a question, wait 5 minutes, and then ask him the exact same question again. "Did we pay the caterer?" I would ask over dinner. "Yes, babe, we did," he would answer, pouring me another glass of wine that I would pretend to sip, but eventually pour into the potted plant when he wasn't looking. 10 minutes later, I would look up from my plate. "Graham, I am worried about the caterer. Did we send the check?" He would smile, a tight, patient smile that didn't reach his eyes. "We did. Reese, don't worry about the money. I am handling all the accounts now. Remember? You just rest." Every time he said the words, handling the accounts or managing the assets, I felt a cold spike of adrenaline. I had my phone in my pocket, the voice memo app running silently, capturing every single offer he made to take over my financial autonomy. I was building a library of his solicitude. While I played the fool at home, Dylan was busy building a fortress. He arranged a meeting for me with a woman named Elena Vance. She was a forensic divorce attorney who specialized in high-net-worth fraud. We met in the back of a rental car in a parking garage. A cliché, perhaps, but necessary given that Graham likely had trackers on my own vehicle. Elena was terrifyingly efficient. She didn't offer sympathy. She offered strategy. "He is building a case for incapacitation," she told me, flipping through the file Dylan had prepared. "He wants to show a pattern of cognitive decline, if he can prove you are mentally unstable. He can petition for emergency temporary guardianship. Once he has that, he can liquidate the trust, transfer the assets to offshore accounts. And by the time you prove you are sane, the money will be in the Cayman Islands." "He has Tessa helping him," I said. "She is pushing me to see her doctor." "Do not see her doctor," Elena warned. "And do not refuse medical care, either. That looks suspicious. Go to an independent specialist. Get a full neurological workup. Get a toxicology screen. We need proof that you are clean, sane, and sharp as a tack on the exact dates he claims you were losing your mind." So I did. I told Graham I was going to get a manicure, and instead, I drove to a private clinic 3 towns over. I spent 4 hours getting poked, prodded, and scanned. I took a cognitive assessment test and scored in the 99th percentile. I had a hair follicle test done to prove I wasn't on any medication. When the doctor handed me the results, a certified letter stating I was in perfect mental and physical health, I felt like I was holding a shield. But I needed to know how deep the rot went. I needed to know if Graham was just waiting for me to crack, or if he was actively hunting for the access codes. I decided to set a trap. I took an old manila envelope and labeled it in thick black marker, "Trust Fund Access Keys, 2026 Update," inside. I put a stack of meaningless papers, old recipes, a warranty for a blender, random junk mail. I sealed it with a piece of tape. I placed the envelope in the bottom drawer of my nightstand, buried under a pile of silk scarves. It wasn't hidden, but it wasn't obvious. You would only find it if you were looking. I did one more thing. I plucked a single long hair from my head and licked one end of it. I pressed it across the seal of the envelope, so fine it was almost invisible. If anyone opened that drawer and moved the envelope even an inch, the hair would fall. Then I waited. Tessa came over the next morning. She breezed in with a tray of green juice and a basket of supplements. She looked radiant, the picture of a supportive best friend. If you ignored the fact that she had sold me out for a memory card and a stack of cash. "You look so pale. Reese," she cooed, touching my cheek with a hand that felt like ice. "Graham says you have been having headaches. I brought you this new blend. It is great for cognitive function." "You are so good to me," I said, taking the juice. I made a show of drinking it, then managed to spit most of it back into the cup when she turned to look at the garden. "I don't know what I would do without you guys. I feel so scattered." "It is okay to be scattered," Tessa said, sitting down close to me, too close. "That is why you have Graham. He is so good at the details. You should just sign that power of attorney he mentioned. Let him take the burden off your shoulders, just for a few months." "Maybe you are right," I said, letting my voice drift. "I just want to sleep." "Then sleep," she urged. "Go upstairs. I will stay here and keep Graham company." I went upstairs. I lay in bed for an hour, listening to the murmur of their voices downstairs. They were probably celebrating. They probably thought I was fading away. When I heard the front door close and Graham's car pull out of the driveway, I sat up. I waited another 10 minutes to be sure. Then I opened the nightstand drawer. The scarves were shifted. I lifted the pile. The envelope was there. To the naked eye, it looked untouched, but the hair was gone, and the envelope was rotated slightly. I had placed it with the label facing the back of the drawer. Now, it was facing the front. Someone had found it. Someone had picked it up, realized it was junk, and put it back. A cold smile spread across my face. They were looking. They were desperate. The confused wife act was working so well that they were getting bold. They thought I was too out of it to notice my own drawers being tossed. That evening, Graham came home with flowers, huge, white lilies that smelled like a funeral home. He was exceptionally tender. He cooked dinner. He poured the wine. He asked me how I was feeling with a gentleness that made my skin crawl. "I just want to take care of you," he said, holding my hand across the table. "I hate seeing you like this. If you just trust me. Reese, I can make all the noise go away." He sounded like he was talking to a dying pet. He was pushing the boat out to sea, gently, lovingly, shoving me into the dark water so he could claim the insurance money. "I trust you, Graham," I said, looking him dead in the eye. "I trust you completely." I saw him relax. I saw the tension leave his shoulders. He thought he had done it. He thought the resistance was gone. I took a sip of water to hide the smirk that was threatening to break through my mask. Keep acting. I told myself, applause is coming. But not for him. I was no longer the victim in a domestic tragedy. I was the director of a revenge thriller, and they were walking right onto their marks. 2 days later, Graham made his move. It was presented as a gift, of course. Everything Graham did was wrapped in the shiny paper of benevolence, hiding the sharp edges underneath. He suggested a brunch. "Just a small get-together," he said, adjusting his tie in the mirror while I lay in bed, feigning the lethargy of the medicated. Some of the partners from the firm, maybe Judge Holloway and his wife, they were disappointed they missed the reception. "It is a chance for you to make a good impression, now that you're feeling a bit more stable." I knew exactly what it was. It was not a social gathering. It was a competency hearing disguised as a meal. He needed witnesses. He needed credible, high-standing members of society to see his wife looking frail, confused, and dependent. He needed them to nod sympathetically when he guided my hand to the water glass. He needed them to remember. Later in court, that poor Reese could barely hold a fork, let alone manage a portfolio of diversified assets. "That sounds lovely," I whispered, staring at the ceiling. "I will try my best. Just wear something simple," he advised. "Don't overdo the makeup. You look better when you are natural." Translation: Look sick. Look pale. Look like a ghost. I texted Dylan the moment Graham went downstairs to start the car. The Sterling Club. 11 o'clock. It is happening. Dylan's reply was instantaneous. Asset protection team is in place. We have a table booked 2 spots over. Do not look at them. Your lawyer, Elena, sent a paralegal to pose as a diner. He is wearing a gray suit and reading a financial newspaper. He is there to witness the coercion. I got dressed with the precision of a soldier putting on armor. I chose a dress of pale lavender, a color that washed me out and made me look fragile. I skipped the blush. I left my hair loose and slightly unstyled. I looked like a woman who was holding it together by a thread, but underneath the silk, taped securely to the inside of my bra, was a high-fidelity digital recorder. And in my clutch, the one I refused to let out of my sight, was the dossier Elena and Dylan had compiled. We arrived at the Sterling Club at 10:45. It was a place that smelled of old leather, polished mahogany, and generational wealth. The air conditioning was set to a temperature that felt clinically cold. Tessa was waiting in the lobby. She rushed over to me the moment we walked in, her heels clicking aggressively on the marble floor. "Reese!" she exclaimed, grabbing my arm with a grip that was tight enough to bruise. "Oh my God. Honey, are you okay to be out? You look like you're about to faint." She was projecting her voice. She wanted the receptionist to hear. She wanted the valet to hear. "I am okay," I said, making my voice small and trembling. "Just a little dizzy." "Dizzy?" Tessa peered into my face, her eyes wide with fake solicitude. "Is it the vertigo again? Or the noise? Graham told me you were hearing things yesterday. A ringing in your ears, or voices?" I felt a chill go down my spine. Voices. That was the specific symptom she was trying to plant. Hearing voices was the golden ticket to a diagnosis of psychosis. If they could get on record that I was hallucinating, my signature would be worthless, and Graham would be my legal guardian by Friday. "Just a ringing," I corrected softly, pulling my arm away. "No voices. Tessa, just stress." Right. She patted my shoulder, condescendingly. "Stress. Come on, let's get you seated before you fall over." We walked into the private dining room. The table was set for 8. Graham's business partners were there, men in expensive suits with eyes like sharks. Judge Holloway was there, a man I had known since childhood, looking at me with deep, furrowed concern. Graham pulled out my chair. "Careful, darling," he murmured. "Sit slowly." I sat. I folded my hands in my lap. I looked down at the tablecloth. I let them talk around me. For the first 45 minutes, I was the perfect prop. Graham told stories about the honeymoon we never really had, painting a picture of a wonderful trip cut short by my sudden episodes. He spoke of my confusion, my memory loss, my erratic behavior. "She forgot where we were the other morning," Graham told the judge. His voice lowered in confidence. "She thought she was back in her college dorm. It is heartbreaking. Sir, I am just trying to keep everything stable for her until she recovers." The judge nodded, looking at me with pity. "You are a good man, Graham. It takes a lot of strength to care for a spouse in crisis." I bit the inside of my cheek until I tasted copper. "Keep talking. Graham, dig the hole deeper." The waiter cleared the plates. The coffee was poured. The atmosphere shifted from social to serious. I saw Graham catch Tessa's eye. A subtle nod. It was time. Graham reached into his briefcase, which he had kept by his feet. He pulled out a sleek blue folder. He placed it on the table, not in front of him, but in front of me. "Reese, honey," he said. The table went quiet. Every eye was on us. "I didn't want to bring this up, but the judge says we really should handle it while we are all here. It is just some housekeeping." I looked at the folder. "What is it?" "It is just the temporary authorization we talked about," Graham said, uncapping a fountain pen. "For the household accounts and the trust management. Since you have been feeling so foggy, the bank is giving us a hard time with the joint transfers. This just lets me sign the vendor checks and pay the staff without bothering you every time you need a nap." He pushed the pen toward me. It is standard procedure, Tessa chimed in, leaning forward. My sister did the exact same thing when she had postpartum depression. It just protects you, Reese, so you don't make a mistake with the money while you aren't yourself. The pressure in the room was physical. It pressed against my chest. The judge was watching. The partners were watching. They were all expecting the weak, confused wife to pick up the pen and sign away her freedom. I reached out. My hand trembled. A perfect, practiced tremor. I took the pen. I opened the folder. The document was titled, General Power of Attorney. It was not limited to household accounts. It was total. It granted Graham Hale full authority to sell, transfer, liquidate, and manage all assets, real estate, and future inheritances. It was a death warrant for my identity. I stared at the paper for a long moment. I let the silence stretch until it became uncomfortable. I let Graham start to sweat. Just a little. Then I looked up. I didn't look at the paper. I looked directly at Graham, and for the first time in 4 days, my eyes were not cloudy. They were clear. They were sharp. They were the eyes of a woman who knew exactly what she was looking at. Graham, I said. My voice was not small anymore. It was low, steady, and crystal clear, projected perfectly for the microphone taped to my chest. Yes, honey? He asked, his smile faltering slightly at the change in my tone. This document, I said, tapping the paper with the tip of the pen. You said it was for vendor checks. It is, he said, a little too quickly. It covers everything. It certainly does, I said. I leaned forward, mirroring his posture. So I just want to clarify one thing before I sign. Is this a temporary power of attorney for household logistics, or is this the first step in your petition for involuntary guardianship? The room stopped. The clinking of silverware at the other tables seemed to vanish. Graham froze. His mouth opened slightly, but no sound came out. The question was too specific. It used legal terminology that the confused Reese shouldn't know. It cut right through the fog he had spent weeks manufacturing. I don't know what you mean, Graham stammered, his charm slipping. Reese, you are confused again. This is just to help you. I don't feel confused, Graham, I said, my voice rising just enough to carry to the table where the gray-suited paralegal sat. I feel very lucid enough to know that a general power of attorney isn't needed to pay a caterer, and lucid enough to wonder why you need control over my trust fund to buy groceries. I saw the panic flare in Tessa's eyes. She reached out to grab my hand. Reese, stop it. You are making a scene. You are having an episode. Am I? I asked, pulling my hand away. I looked at the judge. He was frowning now, looking from Graham to me, sensing the sudden shift in the current. Graham's face hardened. The loving husband mask cracked, revealing the cold, calculating stranger underneath. Sign the paper, Reese, he said, his voice dropping to a growl. We can discuss the legal terms at home, but right now, you are embarrassing yourself. No, Graham, I said, closing the folder with a snap. I don't think I am the one who is about to be embarrassed. I stood up. My legs were steady. My hands were still. The actress had exited the stage. The prosecutor had arrived. I stood up from the mahogany table, smoothing the front of my lavender dress with a calmness that felt almost supernatural. The silence in the private dining room was heavy, the kind of silence that usually precedes a natural disaster. Graham was still holding the pen out to me, his smile frozen in a rictus of confusion and annoyance. I owe everyone here an apology, I said, my voice steady, pitching it perfectly so it carried to the back of the room where Dylan's associate was sitting. I brought you all here under false pretenses. My husband told you this was a brunch to celebrate our union. In reality, he brought you here to witness my execution, not of my body, but of my legal personhood. Graham laughed, a nervous, dry sound. Reese, sit down. You are hysterical. I am not hysterical. Graham, I said. I am clarifying, and since we are discussing transparency and trust, I think it is only fair that we look at the evidence you have been so carefully curating. Only, I have a few additions to the file. I pulled a small remote from my clutch, the large smart screen on the wall, usually reserved for stock market tickers or sports. Flickered. I had synced it with my phone 10 minutes ago, while pretending to check my lipstick. "What are you doing?" Tessa hissed, half rising from her chair. "Sit down. Tessa," I commanded. The authority in my voice was so absolute that she actually sank back down. Stunned, I pressed the button. The screen flared to life. It was the footage from the hotel corridor. The timestamp read 8:42 in the evening. "For those of you who were at the reception," I narrated, pointing at the screen, "you might recognize the groom, or at least the man wearing the groom's tuxedo. On screen, the fake Graham walked out of the changing room. He adjusted his cufflink. He checked the hallway. Then Tessa appeared. The guests at the table gasped. Judge Holloway leaned forward, squinting behind his spectacles. "That's you, Graham," the judge said. "And Tessa." "Watch the hands," I said. The transfer happened. The thick envelope passed from Tessa to the man. The black key card passed from the man to Tessa. It was undeniable. It was a transaction. "That is a lie," Tessa shrieked, her face turning a blotchy red. "That is deepfake. She made it up." "I have the raw files from the hotel server," I said calmly. "But let's listen to the audio." I clicked the next file. The stairwell. The man who looked like Graham leaned against the wall, loosened his tie, and smirked. His voice, rougher, cruder, distinctly not Graham's, boomed through the dining room speakers. "Yeah, it is done. Easy. Like taking candy from a baby." She didn't suspect a thing. Graham's face went white. Not pale, but the color of bleached bone. He looked at the screen, then at me, and I saw the moment he realized that the trap he had built for me had just snapped shut around his own leg. "You hired an impersonator," I said, turning to face him. "You hired him to establish a timeline. You wanted proof that Graham Hale was in the hallway so that when my trust fund documents disappeared from the purse Tessa stole, you would have an alibi. You could say you never entered the room." "This is insane," Graham sputtered, standing up. "Judge, she is having a breakdown. This is exactly what I was talking about. She is editing videos to frame me because of her paranoia." "Am I?" I asked. I reached into my bag and pulled out a stack of papers. I threw them onto the center of the table. They fanned out, sliding over the untouched plates of salmon and eggs. "This is a log from the hotel security system," I said. "It shows that 6 weeks ago, you, Graham Hale, signed a work order to move those specific cameras. You claimed it was for aesthetic clearance for the flowers, but you moved them to create the exact blind spot where your actor stood." I pointed to the next document. "This is a forensic analysis of a bank transfer request submitted at 3 a.m. 2 nights ago. It has my signature on it, but it is a digital forgery, lifted from our marriage license. And this," I pointed to the final paper, "is a notification that you changed my mailing address to a shell company in Nevada." Graham was shaking now. His hands were clenched into fists at his sides. The partners from his firm were backing away from the table, looking at him with dawning's horror. They knew what fraud looked like. They knew what prison looked like. "She is lying!" Tessa screamed, standing up and pointing a trembling finger at me. "She is mentally incompetent. She hears voices. She forgets where she is. You can't trust a word she says. She needs to be institutionalized." "I expected you to say that," I said. I produced one last piece of paper. It was heavy, cream-colored, and bore the gold seal of the State Medical Board. "This is a certificate of mental and physical health," I read aloud. "Dated yesterday, signed by Dr. Eris Thorne and 2 independent neurologists. Toxicology is clean. Cognitive function is superior. I am not crazy. Tessa, I am just the only person in this room who isn't a thief." The silence that followed was absolute. Then, the heavy double doors of the dining room opened. Elena Vance walked in, followed closely by 2 uniformed police officers and Dylan. Elena looked like a Valkyrie in a tailored suit. She walked straight to the table and dropped a thick legal file in front of Graham. "Graham Hale," she said, her voice crisp and professional. "You are hereby served with an emergency restraining order and a freeze on all marital assets. We are also filing a formal complaint with the district attorney regarding wire fraud, identity theft, and conspiracy to commit grand larceny." Graham looked at the police officers. He looked at the judge, who was now shaking his head and pulling out his phone, likely to distance himself from the fallout. He looked at the ruin of his life, and then he snapped. He turned on Tessa with a feral snarl. "You said you handled the cameras," he shouted at her, his voice cracking. "You said you wiped the server logs. You stupid cow. You ruined everything." The room gasped. It was over. He had just confessed. He had just admitted. In front of a judge, his business partners, and 2 police officers, that he was part of the conspiracy. I watched the realization hit him a second too late. He clamped his hand over his mouth, but the words were already in the air, hanging there like smoke. "Mr. Hale," one of the officers said, stepping forward and unhooking handcuffs from his belt. "Ms. Wynne, I think we need to have a conversation down at the station." Tessa started to cry, a loud, ugly sobbing sound. Graham didn't cry. He just stared at me. He looked at me with a mixture of hatred and grudging respect. He had wanted a trophy wife. He had wanted a victim. Instead, he had married his downfall. "I trusted you," he whispered as the officer turned him around. It was the most narcissistic thing I had ever heard. He felt betrayed because I hadn't let him destroy me. "I know," I said softly. "That was your first mistake." I watched them get led out of the restaurant. I watched the diners in the main room crane their necks to see the spectacle. I watched Dylan nod at me from across the room, a small, grim smile on his face. I didn't feel a surge of joy. I didn't feel like cheering. I felt light. I walked out of the club and into the bright, blinding sunshine of the parking lot. The air smelled of exhaust and jasmine. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs completely for the first time in days. The weight of the ring was gone from my finger. I had left it on the table next to the subpoena. I was alone. I was single. I was facing a long legal battle to untangle the rest of the mess. But as I walked toward my car, I checked my watch. It was 2 p.m. on the second day of my marriage. According to the calendar, it was still my honeymoon. And for the first time, I actually felt like celebrating. Because this wasn't the end of my life. It was the beginning of my freedom. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I would love to know where you are tuning in from today. So please leave a comment down below and share your thoughts on Graham's downfall. If you enjoyed this story and want to hear more tales of justice served, please make sure to subscribe to the Lily Revenge Stories channel. Like this video, and smash that hype button so we can share this story with even more people.